Hi, I'm Colin.
And I'm Phil.
We're the hosts of Science Fiction 101.
It's a show which gets to the heart of science fiction. Books, films, TV. We've covered Star Trek,
Doctor Who,
Star Wars.
We love to explore the past, present, and future of science fiction.
And we'd love for you to join us on Science Fiction 101. Hi, Colin.
Hi, Phil.
It's October 2024. And I don't know about where you are, Colin, but where I am, this very month is 50 years since the Planet of the Apes TV series debuted on national TV. So I thought it would be good to talk about it.
I think it's exactly 50 years here, too. So I definitely think we should talk about it.
Good. Before we do that, let's have some feedback from listeners. Last episode, of course, we were talking about conventions and the World Science Fiction Convention, which Colin attended as our roving reporter. And Sue wrote to say, oh no! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 4 O's in no. Oh no! I was so sorry to hear that roving reporter Colin was felled by overseas bugs, but his description of the con was riveting. Sue goes on to say that special guest Peter Kusky was charming and obviously worked hard on his dastardly quiz, which is true and true. And finally, on that episode's title, Sue said, Conventional Wisdom, that's the title of the episode, added still more enjoyment. Well done all round, gents. She's still calling us gents. So we're obviously in Sue's good books. And then Linda said, and I think this must have been in reference to my attempt to pronounce something in German for some reason, can't remember what it was now, but Linda said, Tolle Aussprache.
Whoa.
Which I think means good foreign language talking or something. And then we heard from Damo, who said, a great talk, fellas, and I would fully echo all of Colin's advice about attending the convention. Your comment that it was like a small city devoted to SF was absolutely on point. And Damo also had something to say about Colin's observation that there were a lot of people knitting at the World Science Fiction Convention. Damo said, I saw at least 1, if not 2, knitters in every talk. I suspect that this is partly to do with the strong presence of neurodiverse people in the SF community and how knitting is very popular among neurodiverse folks. Sometimes it is an actual stim. I'm convinced of this because of one very moving talk I went to about neurodiversity in SF, and there were at least half a dozen knitters there. That talk was especially well moderated, again in line with what Colin said. So thank you, Damo, thank you, Sue, thank you, Linda, thank you, everybody who posted comments on the last episode. If you'd like to post a comment, you can post on our Facebook page, where we can be found as Science Fiction 101 Podcast, or you can visit our blog, which is 101sf.blogspot.com. So let's talk apes. When did you first see Planet of the Apes TV series? Was it when it was first on?
No. It would have been on after my bedtime in 1974. Oh. We were still living in town then.
Okay. I thought you were going to say we were living in a tent.
No, I did live in a shop for a while, but that's a separate story.
In this country, it was shown on a Sunday evening at 7:15 p.m, across the country. I think there was one region that didn't show it. It was a big thing for us as kids. And must have been the year before, I had seen Battle for the Planet of the Apes in the cinema, which is the 5th Planet of the Apes film. I had no idea what it was when I went into the cinema because I was taken by somebody who said, hey, we should go and watch that. Oh, okay then. So I had no idea what it was. And I'm sure I was totally baffled by it. But I loved it, even though I was a bit confused. And then the following year, 1974, all of a sudden, we saw this trailer on the TV for Planet of the Apes. And I assumed, as did my dad, that it was going to be the first film that they would have now the films were finished in the cinema, they were going to be shown on TV. So we got all excited to see this first film. But then we learned, no, it's a series. Wow. So every Sunday we would sit and watch it. And then I think probably after that I had to go and have my Sunday bath to get me all clean for going to school the following morning. But looking back at it now, what do we think of it? That's really the question, I think. But before we get to what we think of it now as adults, let's talk about what the TV series is. The first thing that strikes me when watching it is it's yet another American TV show where you've got the blonde one and the dark-haired one in some kind of partnership.
I never noticed that.
I can't remember what preceded it in that regard, but it was certainly followed by Starsky and Hutch and the Dukes of Hazzard and probably many other shows as well.
Oh yeah, Chips was that way.
Yes,
Battlestar Galactica was that way.
Oh, good grief, yes.
Holy smoke.
I think it's just to help people tell the characters apart, You don't have to have much characterization. You can just, it's the blonde one, or it's the dark-haired one. But of course, in this case, the blonde one, played by Ron Harper, and then the dark-haired one, played by James Norton, were accompanied by the hairy one, which was Galen the chimpanzee, played by Roddy McDowall.
Yep.
So we actually had a trio of regular characters. What was your sort of impression when you first ever saw the series, do you think?
I would have been 5 or 6. Mm-hmm. It would have been in the summer, right, because I'm pretty sure that that the Portland affiliate, which we could receive 2.5 hours south of Portland, all the way down in Cottage Grove, was syndicating that on weekday mornings.
Wow! So every day was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it didn't take very long to go through a complete sequence of all the episodes.
No, because there's only 14.
Yeah, but I remember just being entranced by it.
Yeah.
And rooting for the humans to try and, get home and get away.
I wouldn't have known this at the time because I was not familiar with The Fugitive, but looking at it now, it very much strikes me as yet another variation on the TV show The Fugitive, where you've got people who are just running week after week, running away from the people who are pursuing them for a crime they did not commit, or in this case, for time travel they undertook without permission. I don't know what the crime was, really. Just being human is the crime. Mm-hmm. And they're running from week to week, and that means every week they turn up in a new place and they meet new friends and enemies, and they solve problems, and then they run off into the sunset yet again. So that is The Fugitive. And I now know that that's the basis of probably 50% of American TV in the 60s and 70s. It's the standard format of so many shows.
Oh, yeah. Land of the Giants was that way.
Yes, indeed. The Invaders was that way. The Incredible Hulk was that way.
Oh, yeah. Good call.
So many shows. Yeah. So it really is The Fugitive. But again, looking at it now, it also looks to me very much like something like Bonanza or The High Chaparral, any of those 60s or 70s Western shows. Because although it's Planet of the Apes, it could be called Planet of the Horses, because there are so many horses in this show, and people are running around with guns as well. Well, I said people, apes are running around with guns, and occasionally a human gets their hand on a gun. So it has a lot in common with Westerns. Yeah,
I think that's part of the, what I want to say, the theology, the world building of the Planet of the Apes.
Yes.
And it's central to the whole core of the story. The idea that the ape controlling classes know about the history. They don't know everything about it, but they know that humans were bad and their technology destroyed the world, and that allowed apes to rise. And so that the humans are they're a controlled class of people. Mm-hmm. And they're continuously trying to hide that. And then all these astronauts start showing up. And boy, does that really throw a wrench into the mix.
Yeah.
And so they're doing the best they can to prevent these humans from how do I explain this? From making the same mistakes that they did in the past and destroying ape society too.
Yes.
But in doing that, they become Luddites.
Right.
Where they're destroying anything that's new or different.
Yes. So the apes themselves could very well take on any of the technologies that they find out about, because they do keep finding books and ruins of old cities and so on. It's a decent science fiction premise for a series, isn't it?
Yeah. So things like the pulley have not been invented.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Magnifying glasses.
Yes.
Simple medicines and remedies.
Yeah.
None of that has come around.
Yeah. I noticed a bit of a contradiction between two episodes in regard of one of those things. In one episode, there's a female chimp who wears glasses. But in a later episode, one of the astronauts polishes up a piece of glass to make a what Galen calls an expander, a magnifying glass. So yes. The concept is that apes don't know anything about lenses. But only a few weeks earlier, people would have seen an ape wearing glasses, so with lenses in them. Occasionally you get these little contradictions that come in. Yeah,
that's surprising to me. You think there'd be someone who would be looking at continuity.
Yeah.
Although, in the 70s, we're talking about the time where there is no continuity between episodes. Yeah. Every episode is a full reset. The next one starts and there's no memory or discussion about the past or the future.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that just makes it easy to reschedule things based on what they want to show, or if it's better for syndication, or if that was just the way they wrote stories then.
I think it's all three of those. It is the way they wrote stories then, but it was because they knew that episodes could be shown in any order by the network. So don't bust a gut trying to make it continuous, because the network will stymie those attempts. And also in syndication, stations will randomly pick episodes to show whenever they want. So there was lots of pressure, most of it unconscious, I'm sure, but there was lots of pressure for people to just do standalone episodes. But having said that, there is a little bit of continuity between some of these, especially at the beginning, where the astronauts crash land on the planet, just like Charlton Heston did back in the first movie, and the spaceship is ruined, they can't use it, but they have got one thing. They've got this little memory disk, which, if only they had a computer, they could read the disk, find out what went wrong, and possibly one day build a ship and go back to where they came from, or to where they were going to, because that's one of the unstated things of this show. We don't know where they were trying to get to. They were just astronauts and they ended up on this strange planet. But for a couple of episodes, they do pursue this thing of, if only we can find a computer. But it's not done with a great deal of continuity. It's more that they are on a quest. But somewhere along the way, I tried to pay attention to this on my recent rewatch, but I lost track. Somewhere along the way, they stopped talking about this computer disk, and it's as if at the beginning they're on a quest, but then they forget that they're on a quest, and they never mention it again.
Yeah, I think that might have been, and I think I watched these in creation order rather than some broadcast order.
Right.
So I saw the disc in at least the first 3 episodes, the premiere, the one called Gladiators with Mark Singer in it.
Right.
And then The Trap, the one about the earthquake.
Yeah.
Oh, no, there was another one.
There's one called The Legacy, I think.
Yeah. I didn't take any notes on that one. That's a shame.
Yeah.
That's right, because there was another one where they were able to find a computer that had a message about a technology cache that the apes then destroy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think that was part of a source of tension between Alan and Pete, because Alan had a family back in the past and Pete didn't.
That's right.
So Pete was a little happier just to kind of be where they were and be alive, and Alan was always like pushing the boundaries and taking risks, trying to find a way to get back to his family.
But they don't really play it for conflict, do they? It's just a little bit of niggle between them.
Yeah. Did you recognize... So when you watch these episodes, do you watch them from beginning to end, or when the story ends, do you close off and not see the end credits?
No, I usually see the end credits as well.
Did you recognize the names of the story editors?
I did, yeah. Did you?
I did, yeah. Because at the same time that I was watching on weekday mornings, Planet of the Apes, on Saturday morning, I could also watch Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Created by Ruby and Spears.
And there they are on the Planet of the Apes as story editors.
Yeah, getting their feet wet, I guess.
Yeah. That is one of the strangest things. And if you look them up on IMDb, most of their credits for their entire career was in cartoons. And Scooby-Doo is probably their biggest hit. But yeah, they were cartoon writers. And yet here they are in charge of script on this live action TV show. And I can only assume that somebody wanted this to be aimed at kids. And some episodes are indeed quite childish, I think. Even the most Scooby-Doo-ish episodes of this are not as good as Scooby-Doo.
No. I think it's because in a cartoon you can really lean into it. Yeah. Whereas, for this, it's adult drama. Yeah. It's very light.
Yeah.
It's the Knight Rider of the 1970s. Although, at the same time, there are these, what I picked up on, and this is, again, 50 years later, were like persistent themes of racism and classism.
Yeah, yeah.
Although, it was weird to see this happening to two white guys. And so, as the people that tend to perpetuate the racism, here we were seeing racism against these two guys. So maybe it's playing the counter side to try and help people understand better or to pick up on it, or...
if you want to be positive about the series, I think that's a good way of looking at it. For 1 hour every week, it gave white people the opportunity to feel what it's like to be oppressed. But the problem with that is that those white guys turn out to be really, really exceptional. Turns out they know everything about everything. And it would have felt more real in a way if the white guys who were being oppressed were just ordinary people, rather than super geniuses, which they were.
Yeah, astronauts, the best of the best of the best.
Yeah. I mean, that's realistic in the sense that that's what astronauts of that time were. Many of the early astronauts, or sort of Apollo-era astronauts, were really highly educated. Some of them had PhDs. They were scientists as well as pilots. Something that struck me about it on a very mechanical level is that this series has a lot of stunt work in it. And some of it is really very good. I was amazed at the number of times I saw somebody leaping onto a horse. Or there was one episode where it's a bit comical, really. You see Virdon, the blonde one, he just leaps out of a window. And then Galen does exactly the same thing, follows him. Now, whether it was really them, whether it was really those actors or whether it was stunt doubles, I don't know. I didn't pause the recording to watch. But there are some amazing little stunts that were just done because they could, not because they particularly served a plot point. And a lot of those were relating to horses, horse riding. There is some terrible continuity around the stunt work, though, because quite often they use a stunt double. And the episode The Horse Race has Ron Harper, the blonde one. Most of the time when he's on a horse, it's not him. It is so clearly his stunt double. And they sort of cover him in paint or mud or a hat or something, anything to disguise the lack of similarity between the stunt guy and the real actor. But having said that, the stunt work was really very good. And I was quite surprised by that, because that must make it very expensive, on top of the other things, like half of your cast is going around in these expensive appliances on their face, which took 4 hours in makeup to put on. It's a weird show. It's very cheap in some respects, and yet it must have been very expensive to make.
True. I hadn't thought about that. Although I did think about the cost of making the masks, because all the masks for all the guests seemed quite unique. And so they didn't have a lot of... The casting was small, especially for the apes.
Yeah.
And a couple of times they recycled actors into new ape characters just using new masks.
Yes, I noticed that.
The nostalgia was running strong, because I recognized names and faces from all these shows I had watched as a kid.
Yeah.
So watching Martin Brooks, who was Dr. Rudy Wells in The $6 Million Man, play two different apes. That was pretty cool.
It was.
And of course, I knew that, Urko was Mark Lenard, who was Sarek from Star Trek.
Absolutely.
Michael Strong, who was Dr. Corby, also from Star Trek. William Smith, who I think was in everything up through the 90s.
Yeah.
And he's just, a great big ripped buff guy. I'm guessing that at some point he was lifting weights with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was really fun. But it strikes me that a lot of the stunts they were doing were all Western style stunts.
Yeah.
And so it's not like they had to invent, incredible props or anything because it was like a Western. Mm. So this was something they knew how to do and had probably done for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, yeah. And if you compare that to the Apes films, it's only really the first Apes film that is heavy on horses, the one with Charlton Heston. The second one has a few horse-based scenes, but a lot of the second film, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, is set in the ruins of the old New York City. The third film is set in our present-day Earth, so Again, you don't see the ape society. And then from that point on, the films go forward chronologically, and I can't remember if there are any horses in the fifth film. I think in Battle for the Planet of the Apes, they're mostly going around in school buses and old trucks and so on. So to take this TV series really back to the model of the original film and make it horse-based is quite a leap. There's so many other ways they could have done it.
Something else that struck me is this was an interstitial set of series, like Star Wars The Clone Wars or Rebels.
Yeah.
And there's only so much you can do. And so that for continuity, that they could never have gone back home, taking the information that they had destroyed the world and maybe changing the past.
Yeah.
And in the future, there's no chance that they altered society so that and it's been so long since I've watched these movies, so that the race of mutant humans don't blow up the world again.
And that ties in once again to this reset button that is activated at the end of every episode, that each one is completely standalone. There's no sense of development overall. There is no sense of history within these TV episodes, except for what little survives from the former human civilization. And if you try to match the continuity of this to the original films, you'll do your head in, because they cannot exist in the same timeline. I've always maintained that this TV series is probably best seen as a sequel to Battle for the Planet of the Apes, because at the end of Battle for the Planet of the Apes, you've got humans and apes living more or less in harmony, but with the danger that it could become unbalanced again in the future, and apes talk and humans talk. Mm-hmm. And if you then say, well, that's what the TV series is, they are sort of living in harmony, but apes have the upper hand in the TV series, so maybe we're a little bit further on. But the thing that ruins that as an idea is that there's one episode where our astronauts find an old book, or are shown an old book, and they see pictures of New York from something like the year 2700. And that can't be consistent with the original movies, because in the original movies, the battle for the Planet of the Apes took place well before 2700. So if you try and wedge these two things into the same timeline, you really can't get anywhere. I was looking at the origins of this series, and the earliest scripts that exist for the Planet of the Apes TV series were actually written by Rod Serling of Twilight Zone fame. And he, of course, wrote the original script for the first Planet of the Apes movie. So he was commissioned to create the TV series, but his name doesn't appear anywhere on the TV series. So I think what that indicates is that although they took the basic concept from his script, they wanted to do their own thing. So Serling had nothing to do with the series as it was actually made. He did create the character of Virdon. He had, I think the Burke character was, I can't remember the name now, but he was given some sort of vaguely Polish sounding name. And there was a Zeus in Serling's TV script, and he used General Ursus from Beneath the Planet of the Apes in his TV script. Now, as the TV series played out, we do have a Zaius, but he's never called Dr. Zaius. I don't know if you've noticed this in the TV series. He's always just Zaius or Councillor Zaius or Councilman Zaius or something like that, but he is not Dr. Zaius. And the same with Urko. Some people say General Urko, but nowhere in the show does anyone call him General Urko. He's just Urko. Or Urko, depending on how you choose to pronounce it.
Yeah.
So I'd love to have seen a Serling version.
How was it different from what we saw in the broadcast version?
To be honest, I can't remember the details of the stories. It's so long since I read them. I think the basic setup was the same, but the types of stories were a bit different. But I can't remember the detail. However, they do exist online, so I'll put a link in the show notes. So that if anyone wants to go and look at the Serling scripts, they can go and have a look.
I did a little bit of research into why it was canceled. And the reason was low ratings. It was playing in the United States on Friday nights against the NBC comedy block of Sanford and Son and Chico and the Man.
Yeah.
And on ABC, it was playing against the $6 Million Man. And so it makes me wonder if they had put it against, on a different night or earlier or later, if, maybe they would have made more. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, that's so sad. I always hate learning why shows were not successful, because people always assume that if a thing's cancelled, it's because the show itself is no good. But quite often it's because, as you say, it's put in a stupid time slot. I think we were very lucky in the UK that it was shown on a Sunday at 7:15 or 7:30.
This was in the pre-VHS era.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got just the one chance to watch these things. Yeah. That reminds me, though, that Apes was repeated in the UK. So we had the 14 episodes on a Sunday night, and then about a year or a year and a half later, all of them were repeated during the daytime on a weekend. I think it was on a Saturday. And then after that, it disappeared for about 20 years.
Wow.
And then came back on another channel as a sort of a nostalgia thing. I've got some other little snippets of information. I haven't got long lists of names here, but there's one name that comes up again and again, a name that you see in the end credits of most of the episodes. It says, developed for television by Anthony Wilson. Now, Anthony Wilson, I can only assume, took on the kind of Rod Serling role. So after Serling's scripts were rejected for whatever reason, Anthony Wilson must have come in and then redone the format for the show. I think his name appears on all but the first 5 episodes, so it suggests that he kind of was brought in when the show was actually running. But he had previously worked on Lost in Space for years, and he had written episodes of The Fugitive, and hey, look, Planet of the Apes looks like The Fugitive. He wrote for The Invaders, which is a fugitive clone. He wrote for Land of the Giants, which is a kind of a fugitive show. And then the script writers, most of them were people who'd been writing sort of standard American TV all through the 60s and the 70s. So they're people who'd written loads of westerns, loads of cop shows, and that kind of thing. And the same with directors. There's a couple of people who directed Apes who had directed Star Trek. There are a couple of people who wrote Apes who had written for Star Trek. And who was the other one? Oh, yes, the cinematographer, Jerry Finneman, was Star Trek's most famous cinematographer. So there is some really good photography in this show. It's not consistent, but there are some episodes where you get some really good handheld camera work, some really good mobile camera work, particularly following horses. And there's also some odd but impressive use of wide-angle lenses for some close-up shots in some episodes. So it looks pretty good most of the time, except you and I spotted some strange things, didn't we, in some shots?
We did. What episode was that in?
I can't remember. Was it The Good Seed?
It might have been.
Do you want to describe what we saw?
Yeah, so normally when you're looking at a television screen, you have picture all the way to the edge, unless you're watching something upscaled or changed. Yeah. But several times in that episode, it would have like a round filter. And sometimes the filter was on all 4 corners. Sometimes it was only on 3. And so I thought, I know a man who is very, very familiar with the television industry and the technology behind it. I should ask him. So I think I reached out to you on Facebook and told you the name of the episode and what I was seeing. And
yeah, it is weird. It's basically they made some mistakes in some of the shots in one particular episode, which I believe was the first episode filmed. I'm still desperately trying to find firm evidence of this, but what people say all over the internet is that the first episode of Planet of the Apes, where the astronauts crash land on the planet, that was not the first episode filmed. That was about the 3rd episode filmed. This is what people say. And the first one, supposedly, was The Good Seed. Now, that would be a very unusual way of doing things, because normally you film your first episode first. But there's no reason why you have to do it in order. And there may have been good reasons for doing them out of order, so that they may have wanted the actors to sort of bond and get familiar with each other's performances before doing that first episode. But it is rather odd. But the one that is said to be the first one filmed, The Good Seed, has these shots that are just wrong. And it's as if they didn't have time to go back and reshoot. They probably didn't have the money to go back and reshoot. So you get some really crappy shots in there.
Yeah.
And I noticed on a later episode a different kind of thing, and that is that for 10 minutes in one of the episodes, there are very bright white lines down the left and right hand side of the picture. And I've no idea where those would have come from. Presumably when they scanned it to make the DVDs, they didn't adjust the scanning width properly for part of it. And also I noticed the film was all very scratchy. This is on the DVD set, which is the American DVD set, because in fact there never has been a British DVD set. So they used a pretty scrappy print to make the DVDs, and I'd love them to go back to the original negatives, rescan them in HD or 4K, and put out a new set. But they didn't do it for this 50th year, so they're probably never going to do it.
What are the odds that they kept the negatives?
I don't know. Clearly it did go into syndication, so that probably means they did keep the negatives in order to be able to strike new prints if needed. If it hadn't gone into syndication, then there's probably no reason to have kept the negative. We talked about the sort of anti-racist message of the show, if it can be said to have a message. That's clearly there. And I should say that as a little kid watching this back in 1974, I didn't know anything about slavery. That slavery had even been a thing. I just wasn't educated in that sort of thing until this show. So that, I think, makes it quite distinctive for people of my generation, if you like. And within 2 years of this, you get Roots, the miniseries, which of course tackles slavery head-on from a historical point of view, and is a real no-holds-barred, these are the facts kind of thing. Even though it's a drama, most of it is based pretty much on the true history of slavery.
Yeah, I was too young to recognize those things. And so I definitely picked up on it now, but 50 or 47 years ago, that would have sailed right over my head.
Sure, yeah. One other thing that impresses me about the show, looking at it now, is that it has the benefit of all of the props and sets from the original movie. And so that does give it quite a distinctive look. Apart from, as I say, all these sort of farm situations where you see human farmers and ape farmers, and their farmhouses look exactly like the kind of thing you would see on Bonanza from week to week. Whenever you see Ape City, whenever you see apes doing anything, they've got a very well-designed set of costumes, which of course come from the original film, a distinctive set of weapons, again from the original films, some distinctive sets, as you're watching, if you're familiar with the original films, every now and again you think, oh look, there's the statue of the lawgiver, which is from, I don't know which film it is, from the second film. And oh, look at the bars on that prison cell. They're from the prison cell in Beneath the Planet of the Apes. So you see all these props and bits of set coming back from the films. If you've never seen the films, it just feels like they've spent a lot of time and money on making all of this stuff. But if you are familiar with the films, it helps place you back in that original world. And so whichever camp you're in there, it looks really well thought through and consistent. I love that.
Yeah. Something else I want to mention real quick is earlier on, you were talking about how this is like the episodes of The Fugitive, where the fugitive arrives at some place, or in this case, Alan and Pete arrive at some place. They go through cases of discrimination against humans and fear of technology. They have a conflict. They make things better. And then they literally run at the end of every episode. Those guys must have been so fit by the end of those 14 episodes, because they must have, now let's do that take again. And they're probably looking at each other saying, we had to go 100 yards uphill. What are we doing?
Yeah. But it did allow them in the 80s. They took pairs of episodes and spliced them together to make new movies. I don't know if you've ever seen those.
No, I haven't.
It's essentially it's one episode immediately followed by another, with no titles in between or anything. And they also shot some new footage of Roddy McDowall to go at the beginning and the end, where he's Galen, but he's sort of been aged, he's been given grey hair and so on, and he sort of says, hello, I'm going to tell you a story, and he tells you a little bit about the time the astronauts came to Earth, and then he shows you the film. So they're quite quaint, really, but it's a very cheap looking way of making a movie.
Oh yeah, they did the same thing with the Young Indiana Jones episodes.
Did they? That would have been 80s or 90s?
90s, I
90s,
believe.
Yeah. I think we should talk about Roddy McDowall. He plays Galen. He was born, I think, about 1928, because I happen to know that he is about 7 years older than my parents. So when this TV series was made, I think he would have been in his 40s, mid-40s. The character of Galen, I don't know about you, but he comes across as younger than that to me. He feels like a very young, bouncy character, probably as if he's in his 20s or something. And the character of Galen, he sort of comes across as curious. He's open-minded. He's inquisitive. And towards the end of the series, the last few episodes, he's sort of always dressing up. They sort of have some reason that he has to go in disguise and go and visit somebody. So he dresses up as an old man and walks an old ape and walks with a walking stick. Or he dresses up as an old woman with a cart full of grain or something. So it seems like a thing that they developed by the final episodes, that he's this sort of master of disguise. But great performance from Roddy McDowall. He's got this ability to act with his eyes. He does do a bit of facial stuff, not just opening his mouth and twitching of the nose, which is the sort of the common trait that all of the apes seem to have. But he does this incredible stuff with his eyes. He's the only actor I know who can do a double take with his eyes rather than his whole head. A double take when somebody looks at a thing and then looks away and then realises what it was they were looking at, so they look back again. Yeah. That sort of twist of the head. He can do that just with his eyes. It's very effective. And he's one of those actors who seems to be able to do a lot of stuff without blinking, which means he can really lock eyes with another actor and sort of hold the dramatic tension of the moment. I think he's really good. But whenever I've seen him in anything else, I don't find him convincing. So when I just see him as him, I find he overacts. But when he's got the ape makeup on, he just feels so real and natural. Yeah,
well, in that makeup and the mask, you lose so much of their face. that I think the overacting then allows him to, maybe that, mutes him down to normal levels or something. And Urko, all Urko has to do is be scared and be angry and menacing. So he's got like 3 emotions.
Yes.
And Zaius gets to be calm and even-tempered the whole time. And
there are moments when Zaius tells Urko off, and you can always see Urko sort of backing down. He's fuming, but I've got to back down because Zaius is the boss.
But even among the apes, at least in this series, there were power struggles. The last episode was about one of the humans that reinvented flying, and there's a chimpanzee scientist. She's tired of being under the authority of the gorillas and the orangs.
Yeah.
And so she devises a plan to drop bombs on them using that hang glider.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Alan and Pete and Galen stumble into this, the whole thing, and are able to, diffuse it.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. Which is weird because the episode before that is about a human who is building these gas bombs, which he intends to take to Central City and blow up the apes. So there's certainly a very destructive thread running through this series towards the end.
Yeah. Yeah. It always makes me wonder, because we mentioned it was canceled due to low ratings, how far ahead they're shooting versus as the episodes come out and so they can see what the ratings are.
Yeah.
Because, 14 episodes is not a whole season.
That's right. Yeah.
And so they must have decided maybe back at episode 8, hey, this doesn't have any wheels. We can't invest more money in this. It's not a good thing for us. Trickle out the last 6 episodes and then just, put a wrap on it.
And if you're an actor, well, or anybody working on the production, but if you're an actor, that must be very dispiriting if you know that the show's been cancelled, but you've still got to work through a number of episodes. Mm-hmm. That could be horrible.
Like I said, I think because it was cancelled mid-season, I'm guessing the episodes were all shot.
I think the tendency was to commit for a certain number of episodes, but with the option of extending. So I don't think anybody ever got commissioned to do a 26-episode series. What happened is that you got commissioned for the first half. You would work on that first half, and then towards the end of the first half, you would be told whether you were going to be picked up for the second half. So I have a feeling they probably knew just a few weeks before the end.
Yeah, well, and because of the age of the series, most of the actors are no longer with us. I think that James Naughton still is.
He is, yeah.
Yeah, I saw him in some episodes of Blue Bloods.
Oh, right.
Also CBS series a couple years back.
Yeah.
I should have thought about that and reached out to him and say, hey, I'm doing this podcast about an old show that you were on. Can you please tell me about how it ended and what it was like? And
yeah. I gather that he doesn't like to talk about it.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's because he felt that it might have damaged his career, I think. Ron Harper, on the other hand, was always at conventions, and he died just a few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago.
Wow.
Roddy McDowall, I think, died in about 98, so he's been gone some time.
Yeah.
Mark Leonard, don't know, maybe 10 years ago. Booth Coleman, who played Zaius, I don't know when he left us, but I'm sure that was quite some way back.
Yeah. Ruby and Spears, of course, are gone, and who knows about the other staff or cast.
Okay, I won't say anything about Ruby and Spears.
Oh.
What do you think the biggest weakness of the show is, if any?
It's hard for me to separate 2024 Colin from 1970 era or early 80 era Colin.
Yeah.
I can tell you things I don't like about it now, but as to why it wouldn't have worked back then,
yeah,
I think that compared to being up against, someone who was really a superhero, it didn't have a lot of chance. I mean, it was kind of just another morality play for episode of the week.
Yeah. That puts it in the same boat as many other shows, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult. It's one of these things where, because it was cancelled, and it was cancelled so early in the run, we have a tendency to think there must have been something wrong with it. Let's figure out what that is. But when you try to figure it out, it's it's difficult to see that there was anything inherently wrong with the series. There were things wrong with the way they executed it at times. I saw on Facebook that Robert J. Sawyer said that the problem with the show is that it has no mythology to the apes. And that was quite interesting, because obviously the original 5 films, do build up a very definite mythology of how the ape world came to exist and why the apes are the way they are. The TV series doesn't go there and doesn't really provide any of that. It just is, it just says this is the way the world is, and we're not really going to tell you how or why. I think one of the problems with it, but this isn't a fatal flaw, is what I call Schrodinger's apes. And what I mean by that is that the apes in the TV series are simultaneously strong enough to rule the entire planet, but weak enough to be easily jumped by any human.
I did wonder about that. And then I remembered, astronauts were also in the military, and so they must have had professional fight training. Okay. But even then, up against, the raw strengths of a gorilla, there was an episode where the trap.
Yeah.
In the trap, Urko and Pete are trapped underground in a subway station, and they're sealed in, and they're running out of air, and they're trying to get their way out. And there's a big fight scene between them. And Pete finally gives in and acknowledges that gorillas and apes are the superior species, because he's going to lose this, even with his superior training.
Yeah.
But that they kind of have to work together to try and get out.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing ends up falling apart when Urko sees a poster over on the wall about apes in captivity behind bars.
Yeah. And that's got to be the best episode of the lot, don't you think?
That was a very good episode. Personally, I also liked, which one? I liked The Deception.
Yeah, that's the one with the blind ape who falls in love with Burke, thinking that he's a chimp.
Yeah. Just this understanding that racism happens, and it's bad, whether it's people against people, apes against apes, or anything else.
Yeah, I like that one as well. I also like The Good Seed, which is emblematic of a certain type of episode of the series, which is where the astronauts, with all their ingenuity, are able to come in and just solve every problem that exists on this farm. So there's a problem with a water pump, they're able to fix that. There's a problem with a cow giving birth, they're able to fix that. They're able to cure illnesses, they can do everything. They're invincible because they're these super astronauts. But if you just take the episode in isolation, it's just a really nice piece about a little family who have some problems and some issues, and our wandering heroes come in and empathise and help them. And I think that works really nicely.
Yeah. I wonder if they didn't try and do an overall mythology, because the Apes movies had been in popular culture for years at that point.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of, they may not have thought that there was a need to repeat that mythology. But The Good Seeds is an episode where you actually get to learn some things about ape culture. Mm-hmm. What is a family like, and how does the son move on? Well, he moves on when there's a male calf born, so he can go establish his farm over there.
Yes.
And so, he feels like he's stuck because they have heifer after heifer after heifer. And
yeah, that's a very good part of the episode.
It also made me wonder about if apes are vegetarian, because there's one line kind of made as a throwaway, and that is they kill the cow and eat the flesh.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, yeah, so what do you guys do? Well, maybe they grow vegetables and have milk and cheese.
Yeah. Or they just raise them for the hide.
Yeah. Well, there's an awful lot of leather in that culture, so they did something with those cow skins.
And I think on that note, we should move on to a quiz, because we're going to run out of time otherwise.
Yeah, let's.
So what I have here is Test Your Planet of the Apes knowledge, and this is a quiz from Den of Geek. So I'll put a link to the quiz in the show notes, so if anyone wants to have a go for themselves. But I'm just going to give you some questions, and they are multiple choice, but I may not need to give you the multiple choice. You may be able to get there without the additional help. So here we go. Question 1. In the original Planet of the Apes movie, What monument lets Charlton Heston's Taylor realise he's been on Earth the whole time?
The Statue of Liberty.
Correct. Which actor appeared in the most Planet of the Apes movies?
Oh, boy. I'm going to say Roddy McDowall.
Correct. Yes.
Was Charlton Heston a close second, or?
I guess so, because he would have been in 2 of the films. Kim Hunter was in 3 of the films, and Roddy McDowall was in 4 of them. He wasn't in the second Apes movie because he was busy making a movie somewhere else. So they got somebody else to dress up as Cornelius. Question 3. Who played Caesar in the 2010s Planet of the Apes trilogy? So we're talking the reboot movies now.
Right. Oh, in 2010?
Yeah.
Is that Andy Serkis?
It is. It is Andy Serkis.
Whew, I'm glad you didn't ask me about Caesar in the original series, because that would have been a complete... I have no idea. The only character I know from that movie, I think, is Ricardo Montalban.
Okay, well, Caesar was played by Roddy McDowall in Conquest. Counting Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the most recent one, how many Planet of the Apes movies have there been in total?
Oh, my. Now I'm going to show my ignorance.
Okay.
I think there were originally 5.
Yeah.
And I'm actually not a huge fan of the modern Planet of the Apes movies, because they're so non-canonical. I kind of wish they had... They're good movies as standalones, but I don't like that they're so different from the original Planet of the Apes movies or from the book.
Yeah.
And so I don't pay a lot of attention to them. I want to say that the Kingdom, I think, was the 4th one, which makes a total of 9.
Yeah. But you're missing one out, which is the in between. There was Tim Burton's remake. So in total there have been 10.
Wow.
Going back to the first Planet of the Apes film, what was Dr. Zira's nickname for Taylor? And I can give you multiple choice if you want.
Yes, please.
Okay, did she call him Caesar, or Coco, or Bright Eyes, or Cornelius?
Bright Eyes.
Bright Eyes is correct. There was a cartoon series as well in the 70s, after the series we've been talking about. There was a cartoon series, and that had a Blue Eyes in it rather than a Bright Eyes. It's a bit weird. Which returning Simpsons character stars in a Planet of the Apes musical? So you know that Simpsons episode where they do Stop the Planet of the Apes, I Want to Get Off, or whatever it's called?
No, I haven't actually watched The Simpsons in 20 years.
Oh, well, I'm sure it was 20 years ago. Let me give you the choices. Professor Frink, Kent Brockman, Troy McClure, or Chief Wiggum?
I'm just going to pick one. Troy McClure.
Correct. Now, here's a list of actors. Which of these actors did not appear in Tim Burton's 2001 Planet of the Apes film? So one of these did not appear in that film. Christopher Walken, Paul Giamatti, Tim Roth, Helena Bonham Carter. So pick an actor.
Christopher Walken.
Correct. You're doing very well here.
Well, I did watch the movie. I just completely forgot about it.
Yeah, well, it is best forgotten.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question about the modern Planet of the Apes movies, or the ones with Andy Serkis in them. What wipes out humanity's dominance of the planet in that series of films? Is it a nuclear war, a climate change, a meteor strike, or a global pandemic?
It's a global pandemic.
It is indeed.
Created by a human to help his father recover his poor memory.
Oh, yes. I'd forgotten that. Yeah, that's good. Now, in the first Planet of the Apes film, Taylor tells Lucius never to trust someone. Who does he say that about? Does he say never trust humanity, never trust anybody over 30, never trust the government, or never trust religious leaders?
Oh. I'm going to say never trust religious leaders.
No, that would have been in keeping with the theme of the film, but it was never trust anybody over 30.
Oh.
Because Lucius is a young character.
Gotcha.
In the second Planet of the Apes films, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, the underground mutants worship someone or something. What is it they worship?
It's a nuclear bomb.
It is indeed, yes. Between the events of Escape from the Planet of the Apes and Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, Caesar hides out somewhere. Where does he hide out? And I'll give you a clue. He does it with Ricardo Montalban.
He's in a circus.
He is in a circus. Not an Andy circus, but a circus.
Well, there's not a lot of room in Andy Circus. He's kind of a short man, very thin.
In the original Planet of the Apes film, when Taylor gets his voice back, what's the first thing he says? And I'll take any kind of approximation of it.
I don't remember.
It's "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape."
Oh, that's that line?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't be any more left. That was it. Den of Geek says, "You finally really did it, you maniac. You blew up this quiz." And it's giving you 84%, but I skipped a question, so actually I should scale that up. But I think you got nearly everything right there, so very well done. You are an ape nerd.
It goes with my general nerd in general, so.
Time to do the past, present, and future.
I have one past item, and this is an online website which has been released. It's called the Set Blueprint Archive, and it's an online digitized repository of all things Star Trek.
Oh, wow.
So if you want to see blueprints for ships or buildings or console displays or prototype drawings for phasers or aliens, it's all on there.
Wonderful. I've got one past item which ties into our main thing today, which is the Planet of the Apes, and that is Hunter's Planet of the Apes Archive, which is a wonderful website with all sorts of old stuff to do with apes. And there you'll find scripts from the films, from the TV series. You will find factual articles. You will find old comics, because back in the 70s, Marvel had a Planet of the Apes comic, and they've got scans of all of those. And there's loads of stuff, so I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
For a present item or two, Lakewood Theatre, which is here in the Portland metropolitan area, in this month of October for another couple of weeks, is doing a new adaptation of Rossum's Universal Robots, which is the Czechoslovakian play that brought the word robot into popular culture and language.
I know a bit about that because I heard a podcast episode where some people from that area reviewed the play and talked to the director.
Yeah, Matthew Zrebsky was a ton of fun, very intelligent, very engaging, a great speaker, told us a lot about the play and the production and, the themes behind the production as well that he was trying to bring forth and how to make it approachable for modern audiences. He did a great, great job.
Yeah, it was a good episode.
Yeah, so if you're in this area, I would recommend that you come down and see it because it's good stuff. If you're curious about this, if you go to YouTube and you search for Rossum's Universal Robots, you can find other adaptations made by other theater companies because it's a great story. It's really in the vein of Frankenstein and Children of Men and a lot of other modern science fiction.
Very good. I've got a present-ish item. And this is an article from a Spanish newspaper, but it's in English. So if, like me, you don't read Spanish, it's not a problem. It's an article about Pierre Boulle, who, of course, was the writer of the original Planet of the Apes novel. And the article is fairly recent. I think it was published to tie in with the release of the most recent Apes movie. So it just gives a bit of an overview of Pierre Boulle and what he was about. So it's a nice piece.
So an American and a British person are going to talk about a Spanish article about a French author.
That's it. That's how it goes. Yep.
I love it. And I think for my last one there is an article that I have not fully read yet from the Scientific American talking about science fiction books that the staff at Scientific American love.
Okay.
And so if you think about people that write about science and are, professional media people and thinking about what kind of things they might want to read and enjoy, it would be a good place to go to get an overview of those things.
Very good. And then I've got a present/future item. Didn't really know how to categorize this one because it's ongoing. There's a podcast, I don't know if you've come across this one. It's called Every Single Sci-Fi Film Ever, asterisk. And the asterisk is to a footnote which says almost. So every single sci-fi film ever, almost. It's a carefully curated selection of film reviews. So each episode, typically, Aisha, who presents and produces the podcast, selects a science fiction film and then reviews it, usually with a couple of academics who've studied the film or written about it previously. And it's very good. And the reason it's partly a future item is because I'm going to be recording an episode with them on the subject of It Came From Outer Space. I'll be recording that in the next week or so. But the podcast is well worth a listen if you're interested in science fiction movies. And it's working on a chronological basis. So it started with the earliest science fiction films and has now reached the 50s. And then it will carry on from there.
Interesting. A future item that I have is it's October, and in Oregon, that means apparently we have lots of conventions. So the Oregon Science Fiction Convention, Oricon, is going on. Yeah. And later in the month at the Hollywood Theater, again, everything here is Portland centric, and so I'm kind of sorry for our listeners that aren't in the area. We have the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival.
Ah, interesting. So I think that's it for today.
Yeah, I'm kind of wrapped up.
Okay. I hope you've enjoyed our little sojourn on the Planet of the Apes TV style. Give us a comment on Facebook or on our blog. You'll find us at Science Fiction 101 Podcast or at 101sf.blogspot.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.